Welcome to Smart Manufacturing Mindset, where we challenge guests to think differently about manufacturing. We'll explore the nuances that hide in plain sight behind the acronyms, techno jargon, and misinformation to get to the truths that hold real value for real people in the industry.
Hello and welcome. My name is Mike Yost. I'm excited you could join us here today for the next edition of our CESMII Smart Manufacturing Mindset LinkedIn Live series. In every episode, we challenge ourselves and our guests to think differently about smart manufacturing. So far, throughout the course of this series, we've engaged with CESMII members and thought leaders, and we've talked about what a smart manufacturing mindset looks like. We've talked about how CESMII is educating the ecosystem, the manufacturers and practitioners on how to create smart manufacturing roadmaps using the acceleration framework. We've talked about issues that are organizational and operational, and we've also talked about technology. So today, as a response to the great response that came from the virtual workshop on the smart manufacturing architecture and technology, we wanted to keep that momentum going, talking about the technology. And we are going to take today's session here to bring back the leaders, some of the leaders from that session, to answer more questions about the technology from CESMII's perspective. So, joining me in studio today are John Dyke, the CEO of CESMII. Welcome, John.
Hey, Mike. Good to be here again.
Thank you. We also have Jonathan Wise, who's the Chief Technology Architect at CESMII. Hey, Jonathan.
Hey, guys.
And last but not least, we have Doug Lawson, the CEO of ThinkIQ. Welcome, Doug.
Hey, thank you, Mike. Great to be here. Good morning, everybody.
Excellent. So these are the folks that you want to hear from, and I do as well. And as I mentioned, the format's going to be a little bit different this time. We're hoping that most of the questions are going to come from you and not from me. So we encourage you to enter your comments, your thoughts, your questions into the comments field on LinkedIn, and we will screen those and do our best to get to as many of them as we can. Before we do that, I just want to do a few quick housekeeping items and encourage you that if you're new to CESMII, if you don't know who they are, you should get to know them. They're the U.S. National Institute on Smart Manufacturing. They do phenomenal work from a research perspective, project perspective, from an ecosystem development perspective, and they're doing a lot for the industry, and you should get to know them. Check them out online at CESMII.org. I would also say that part of the work that CESMII is doing is building the ecosystem through events like this, and they're doing this in partnership with SME. So we thank the folks at SME for their support as well. Our goal with these webinars is always to challenge ourselves to think differently about what it means to be a modern day manufacturer. We are live streaming on LinkedIn. We welcome your comments, so please make this as interactive as possible. The session is being recorded also, so you can watch it back as many times as you like. And then again, I would encourage you to get to know CESMII, to check them out online at CESMII.org, through LinkedIn, and et cetera, et cetera. So with that, let's go ahead and get on with the show. We're going to ask the experts here as a follow-up to the architecture and technology workshop. So John, how about if we start the conversation with you while we give people a chance to throw some questions in here. Maybe just frame up for those who were not able to attend, what was the workshop? What are you doing? And really talk about in the evolution or the growth of CESMII, right? This is a pretty big deal, right? What you're doing, engaging, and the numbers of people that are engaging with you on this topic.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And I certainly appreciate the chance to have this conversation with our audience. For the last year or so, we've been hosting a series of individual one-on-one workshops with our predominantly manufacturing members and with some of our systems integrators. So with some of the great manufacturing companies, we would bring our leadership team to our members, organizations, to their sites, and we would have these day-long workshops to kind of work through what does smart manufacturing look like? What are, from an architecture and from a technology perspective, what are the permissives? What are the requirements? What are the important capabilities that we require from a smart manufacturing perspective as we think about the democratization of smart manufacturing? How do we reduce cost and complexity for manufacturers to both adopt and scale up and roll out smart manufacturing capabilities in a much more aggressive and accelerated way? I made the point at the beginning of these workshops that U.S. manufacturers are really falling behind Europe and Asia in terms of this adoption and our ability to create the value that is obviously such a vital part of and a driver for why we would do this. And so more recently, we were challenged to take this workshop, this all-day workshop, and make it available to the marketplace more broadly as a virtual workshop. We weren't sure who would sign up for a 7-hour workshop, 6.5 hours of content plus a few breaks. But we decided to go ahead anyways, and we were overwhelmed with the response. We had almost 430 people RSVP, over 300 people attended most of the content for the course of 6.5 hours of content delivery. And since then, hundreds and hundreds have actually viewed it online as we've made that content and the videos themselves available. So we thought because there were many, many conversations and questions that came up during that workshop, we thought we'd bring the sort of some of the key presenters from that workshop to the Smart Manufacturing Mindset dialogue here today, and just do our best to answer the questions that came up in that conversation, and hopefully start with the questions that folks here are willing to throw at us, and we'll do our best to respond as effectively as possible.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That sounds fantastic. So why don't we go ahead and we'll put the link up for those of you who have not seen the content. You'll be able to access the content at the link listed on the screen here. While you're clicking there, we'll come back and we'll talk about sort of the structure of the conversations. But why don't we have the others introduce themselves first? Jonathan, you want to introduce yourself and maybe talk about the sections that you covered in the workshop?
Sure. I'm a chief technology architect at CESMII. Been working on this for about 4.5 years, but similar problems in this space for most of 20 plus. CESMII really gives us this opportunity to zoom out and see kind of what's happening across the industry, how the different players are evolving, and what some of the common challenges are that we all are facing, whether we're making software for manufacturing or we're manufacturers trying to get smarter using the software that's available to us. There's kind of 3 consistent themes that we focus our efforts on that are associated with kind of 3 sets of challenges that I think everybody has to deal with. The first is connectivity, the fact that there's lots of protocols and ways to communicate with data sources in our space, but none of them interoperate. The second is around the modeling of data, turning data into actionable information. And there's some trends that are out there right now that have some good ideas at the heart, but maybe some missing pieces. So we talked a bit about that. And kind of the third is around this theme of openness, accessibility of the data, having documented APIs as part of the solutions that you pick or build, and how those 3 things from a technology perspective enable us all to do better, whether it's building better software or finding better insights from our manufacturing systems from the software we deploy.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that, Jonathan. Why don't we bring Doug up here? Doug, would you like to introduce yourself, and maybe for the folks that are not familiar with ThinkIQ, sort of position the relationship that you have with CESMII and what role you play both in the workshop and then in the conversations here today.
Yeah, happy to do that, Mike. So I'm Doug Lawson. I'm CEO of ThinkIQ. ThinkIQ is a software company. We're one of several vendors that collaborate with CESMII to create the tooling that really is the smart manufacturing environment. So there's 6 or so vendors at this point. It's growing fairly rapidly. In particular, if we talk about ThinkIQ, the part of the platform that we work on is the Smart Manufacturing Interoperability Platform, or the SMIP, and really what's called the SMIP core. So ThinkIQ develops the modeling tools, the overall environment, the connectivity. And then we really have three fundamental things that we do in this ecosystem. The one is interact with CESMII. CESMII have challenged us, pushed us. It's a really interesting thing as a software vendor to be pushed to be this open and to be this driven by standards and to be this collaborative with other vendors. So a lot of pressure from John and the team to do that. And it's been an interesting and a great experience. We also work with other vendors who build applications inside the platform. So a big part of the platform story is its extensibility, the many applications. In John's session, he spoke about how the platform really aims to allow one to have far fewer stovepipe applications. So to get rid of them, the platform needs to allow you to build applications inside the platform. And we work with other software vendors to enable and accelerate that process. And then last but not least, we interact directly with many manufacturers directly who are ready for commercial deployment. We work together with many of CESMII's integration partners or directly with customers when requested to physically deploy the platform in production and achieve specific goals for the customers. So those are the sort of different phases in which ThinkIQ engages in this process.
I appreciate that, Doug, and it is an interesting dynamic, as you mentioned, because CESMII's goal is to scale help to all manufacturers, right? So you're talking about a level of openness and working together potentially in ways that a traditional software organization would not have to work, but CESMII does because you're looking at how everybody can work with everybody.
Correct.
Well, good. So maybe Jonathan, we'll come to you. I just wanted to sort of lay out for everybody, if you haven't seen the flow of the sessions, there were several areas that the team dug into specifically with a level of depth. And I just want to name most of them. And then Jonathan, have you touch on the first one as a starting point. Obviously open for all as well. So the first area, or one of the areas, was the design criteria for next generation smart manufacturing architectures. Another area was modeling, which Jonathan already mentioned, interoperability, which Doug mentioned, talked about material flow and supply chain data interchange, and building next generation apps. So if you're thinking of questions, if any of those spur your thoughts of what the team means by those, please feel free to jump in. But Jonathan, I wanted to peel back to the top and talk about somebody who's looking at what a next generation architecture for smart manufacturing looks like. And you talk about the criteria for that. Could you talk about maybe your thoughts on that, but then also what the interactions were from the workshop? So I don't know if there are 3 design criteria or there's 300 design criteria, or how do you point people in the right direction to get started?
Yeah, 3 design criteria aligned with those 3 themes that I touched on earlier. Maybe in order of least to most controversial, I'm not sure. But the first kind of gauntlet we threw down was stop arguing about the protocol. It doesn't matter that much. There's religious debates about OPC UA versus MQTT or Spark-Plug-B, and those are really all distractions from what the real set of challenges we're facing are. And the reality is you often don't get a choice. Your data sources come with an opinion embedded in them. So you can have whatever other opinion you want, but you still have to work with what's out there. So let's stop having religious debates about this, kind of acknowledge some common realities that we have to deal with, regardless of what the data source speaks, and different patterns for adapting and moving on from there. But let's focus on where value is created, which is really at the end of this chain. The second is that data needs to be modeled. The raw data coming from most data sources in manufacturing isn't great to begin with. And so we need to make sense of it. There's popular discussion around a unified namespace, which I asserted is a bit of a misnomer because of where the unification is happening, not because a namespace is a bad idea. That's not a novel idea at all. But there are other principles from software development, not just the namespace, that need to be brought to bear in modeling. And at CESMII, we advocate for kind of the full spectrum of object-oriented programming capabilities that needs to be involved, not just a namespace created by a local team, but what we call profiles, or namespaces that are informed by interoperability throughout the industry. The related theme is that when we limit our modeling to hierarchical modeling, so parent-child, or how we've traditionally expressed an S95 kind of topology, we're limiting the insights that we can find in our data. So that's not a knock on S95, but on the implementations we have of S95 to date, which are limited to this kind of hierarchical view. We need full graph databases with nodes and edges that allow us to explore relationships beyond just how equipment is arranged. And so that is part of the bar CESMII is trying to set for a next generation of smart manufacturing platforms. And then the third is what we hit on earlier, the openness and interoperability, an API that meets a certain set of benchmarks that ensures that all players can share data with each other and nothing's trapped in a proprietary ecosystem.
Excellent. So just a reminder to anybody that's watching us live right now, if you have questions, please jump in here. We're talking about design criteria right now for the next generation smart manufacturing architecture. And I thought Doug might have a view or an opinion or thoughts on that to piggyback on what Jonathan talked about. Are there any areas to add to what Jonathan said, or any additional points to make?
Yeah, Mike, one of the things that we really tried hard to show in the workshop is, what does modeling really look like? And Jonathan touched on the idea that everything should be object-oriented. When I create a definition of a piece of equipment, it would be nice to be able to deal with it as an object. One of the key ideas in the platform is this is declarative. In other words, it doesn't require developers to make a model, and it should be interoperable. You should be able to load the libraries of objects that give you a really, really good starting point in order to work. And it should be really easy to get to data from a wide variety of data sources. Layering in one step further on top of that, most people, when they start a smart manufacturing voyage, tend to focus on machines, the physical equipment. Really, any physical world consists of people and materials that the machines transform, and then the machines themselves. And very important in the fundamental ideas of the smart manufacturing platform is the idea that we should be able to bring all of this together through the graph that creates relationships between which plants service one another, which machines do what kind of transformation on the materials, how the materials physically flow through a process. And the techniques that one uses for that need to not just work at a particular machine level, but they need to roll up on a continual basis so that they can allow for data exchange at a supply chain level, and that data can become progressively more and more rich as it gets higher and higher up a manufacturing supply chain. So that's one of the other very important parts of what we spoke about, is how does one take these principles for machine connectivity and roll that data up to create a holistic model of an entire supply chain.
Mike, you're on mute.
So now can you hear me? Sorry about that. I was just saying that you brought up points about graphs and interoperability and things like that. I definitely want to come back to that. Also wanted to encourage people to add questions in. And John, I thought I would throw one of the questions to you that came up. It says, as a technologist on a small team within a fairly large organization, I and my peers are bought in. However, we're challenged to convey the philosophy to business partners who ultimately have to buy into our proposed strategy. How would you guys recommend getting started in a way that balances near-term value with a longer-term strategic footing?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, and I think that speaks to the disruption that's essential in this space on the part of the manufacturers themselves. And to your credit, it sounds like these ideas resonate with you and have been socialized in your environment for a while. But the systems integrators, the technology providers and vendors, the machine builders, even the sort of knowledge and the pipeline of workers need to be headed in this direction as well, as you've pointed out. So from our perspective, there's a couple of really basic things that have to happen. We are trying to engage the technology providers, the machine builders, the integrators, the consultants, so that they too are headed in this direction. But specifically, we're doing that very aggressively with those manufacturers and with those organizations that are engaged with us here, so that we can do so in a very targeted and strategic way. We're working with some of the great software companies in this space, the OT software companies, the IT software companies, a lot of the analytics software companies that are members here at CESMII. And we get to even fund some of that transformation, some of that disruption, based on the priorities of the various stakeholders that we work with here. And so I would say step number one is get engaged. Join us here at CESMII to allow us to engage with you and with your partners, many of which are probably part of the conversation already, so that we can help prioritize that transformation, prioritize that disruption. And so I guess the other part of this is something that we've been working on aggressively too, to create a national and even a global awareness of these challenges. We have a relatively new organization called the Smart Manufacturing Executive Council. We look at them as a bit of a think tank, some of the greatest manufacturers here in the US kind of working together to advocate for these ideas at a national and at a global level, to encourage this ecosystem, this community, to either get on the bandwagon, join us on this journey, and very specifically call out the fact that the sort of proprietary approaches, the stovepipe architectures, the data silos that we've tolerated in the past are no longer acceptable, and that we need to move forward in a much more interoperable, open, and collaborative way. So there's a very aggressive and loud and hopefully compelling voice that's encouraging this community to move forward in ways that are consistent with these ideas. So I'll just summarize quickly by saying, participate with us, join us, whether it's as individuals or as a corporation, to say, let's be part of this transformative and this journey together, so that we're not out here doing this on our own. We as a CESMII team are eager and willing to kind of join you in helping tell the story and advocate for your partners to join us on this journey as well.
So maybe Jonathan and Doug, you could jump in on John's point about working with software companies, working with equipment builders, machine builders, et cetera. How's that going? What challenges do you run into? What questions do they have? Those sorts of things. And just before you do that, I would add to John's point that there's an effort nationally by CESMII to educate the ecosystem, to educate manufacturers themselves, and teams of certified facilitators to help companies build roadmaps for themselves. And so that's another area where I think someone like the person that asked the question, they're looking for help how to build an understanding across the business. Engaging in that road mapping work is another area where people can help. So maybe Doug, from your perspective, do you want to comment on John's point of working with other entities and types of technological challenges you're running into, or the problems that you're solving for them by working together?
Yeah, Mike, I'll take a cut at that. Now, I'll start by talking about the hardest piece, and then pull back to how it gets easier over a period of time. So the part of this ecosystem that the longest pole is persuading and getting to the point that multiple software vendors are actually building profiles, building applications that either run inside the platform or run on top of the platform, getting data from it. Obviously, first you have to come up with all the ideas, make the criteria, build a whole basis of software, and only then can you invite others to really participate in that process. And we probably hit that critical point of being ready to invite other vendors into the ecosystem to play about 18 months ago. And for the first year, we had nothing. Would be the honest answer to that. We now have half a dozen different independent companies building applications in the platform. A few of them are in production at this point in time. I had a really great demo the other day of an application built by Fullboard, just as a shout out to them, that does sort of win the hour applications on top of machine performance data running inside the platform. So that's really exciting to see. And it's a very critical part. For me, that was the piece that I looked at and said, if we can't get other software vendors to play, this initiative is going to have headwinds all of the way through. And then the second biggest challenge has historically been really, really difficult, which is to try to get manufacturing companies to exchange data with each other. Historically, tools like EDI have been effective for doing this. Custom-built solutions for data exchange have been effective. Well, what's great to see now, and we see it still predominantly within reasonably vertically integrated companies. So it's actually part of a enterprise or family companies that are related to each other, but actually using profiles to exchange data with each other in near real time has become a great deal easier with the tools that have been created by CESMII. And we're seeing a real uptick in this area, so that the factory floor or the warehouse or the mine or whatever your industrial installation is, each one of those is a silo in a supply chain. And for those silos to be able to easily exchange data with each other using profiles is again one of those critical milestones that we're seeing a level of adoption now. So, this all takes time. One has to get to a critical mass. Going to Scott's question a little earlier, that critical mass really seems to be happening at this point, where we're seeing manufacturers, other software players, the overall ecosystem, the standards creators, more and more people sort of buying in, and those short-term opportunities are now right in front of us. It's no longer a long-term strategic vision. We are in the execution mode. So it's much less difficult to balance that short and long-term tension than it was just a few years ago.
So, Jonathan, maybe you want to continue with that thread that Doug brought up there, as far, because I agree with him that we're seeing, we've been around a long time, right? And I think we're seeing changes in behavior, changes in technology as well. And that's why I think it's critical that there's someone like CESMII that is sort of bringing this together and providing the guidance and direction that you are, because of how quickly the technology changes, right? And any one technology that you focus on is going to be just changing at such a rapid rate of speed. So maybe Jonathan, you want to comment to Doug's points there as far as engaging people and making it simpler, and the types of interactions you're having with people.
So hey Scott, thanks for the question. I think we're dodging it a little bit, and I feel you. As technologists, we like to talk about technology, and its value is self-evident to us. If it's a good solution, then that's cool, and we're interested in that. I think what the others have been saying is kind of CESMII's own realization that that I would want to impart to you is you don't change the industry with a new, cooler technology. We all need to do a better job of talking about the end goal. Like what is the value that we're trying to create? So to you, what is the value that you're trying to create in your organization? And the technology and the strategy that we're advocating for can serve a wide variety of use cases. But when we're talking to a manufacturer, first we need to feel their pain. We need to know what their challenges are, and then we can show them how this strategy can be applied to that problem set. And I think that's probably true within most of your organizations as well. Just talking about the cool tech probably doesn't communicate the business value that you're trying to get to. And so now that you have some confidence in a technology direction or how you want to formulate your strategy, what are the use cases you propose to light up for your business? What are the problems you propose to solve for your business using this? How are you going to make life better for your organization? And then the same question to CESMII, how are we going to make life better for all manufacturing organizations? And it's not graphs or profiles, it's what those things allow us to do and solve. And John is dying to chime in. So go
Yes, I am. So thanks for setting that up, Jonathan. I think so Scott and others, you have an opportunity. The next use case that you will justify internally to invest in will either go down the path of the past, which is Industry 3.0, which is another data silo and another stovepipe architecture and another zero interoperability centric solution. And that's okay, but that's 30 years of creating more data silos. Or you have the opportunity to go down a new path, which represents the capabilities we have been espousing and working towards and aspiring towards, which are now actualizing in real time or manifesting themselves in the marketplace in real time. And so that is the choice you have before you. And I think the value proposition is the same value prop we've been justifying for 30 years. Whatever the desired outcome is, we can justify it. The question is, are you going to justify a new strategy, a new approach that is going to drive down your cost and complexity via this idea of interoperability in the next year, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, et cetera? Or are you going to continue to propagate the level of cost and complexity, that mess that we've largely created as a community of technology providers and implementers in the past? So I think that's the challenge that we would throw out there for the manufacturers like you and your peers out there. Don't accept that sort of Industry 3.0 approach any longer. There is no need for it.
And the reason why kind of weighs into the value communication is you could solve a single problem with the Industry 3.0 approach. That's what we did for years. So we have lots of individual single problems solved in these architectures that weren't designed for sharing. So it behooves us to communicate how two problems individually solved can work together to solve a third problem or to create additional value that we couldn't do the old way. And that's the leap we have to get people to cross, is understanding that solving one thing and solving another thing is not as good as doing so in a way that allows us to solve multiple things out of the same architecture.
Yep. Well said.
And maybe, John, it sounds like the way the question was positioned that folks need help with higher level business conversations. So is that an opportunity to engage CESMII leadership in that type of a conversation, come in and have a value-centric conversation that you can carry potentially, that the teams that are in the plants don't necessarily feel that they can carry?
Yeah, in fact, that's what I love doing. That's what we love doing here at CESMII. We do that literally every day with various members or organizations that we're engaged with here at CESMII to help the folks that understand this vision, convey that to their organization, and drive further adoption and further understanding of these ideas really inside their organization. And that's why we were excited and conveyed at the beginning of this call that there's a genuine sort of transformation that's happening in this industry. There's a hunger for these new ideas. We often say somewhat internally that the manufacturing IQ around these ideas is low, and that our opportunity through these kinds of workshops and even this discussion here today is to educate and provide confidence in the kinds of ideas that we believe are really, really important for manufacturers here in the U.S. to become more competitive, and ultimately that's our mandate here as the USA's Smart Manufacturing Institute. So, yeah, we love doing that. That's part of the exciting part of what we do here at CESMII.
And it's part of the reason why there needs to be an ecosystem, right? Because it's a different conversation when business leaders with what they're facing, and the plant's running, and plant needs to continue to run, and you're making capital investments, and you're getting new products, and you have competitive challenges, and all these different realities that people face. It takes more than just a technology approach to do this. So I wanted to bring up to the group here and just remind everybody here that if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them into the comments, and we will ask them. We'll probably have time for another question or two here. But there was one that came actually from the survey that we did following the workshop that I thought would be good. And maybe Doug, I guess, why don't you start with it, or others if you want to jump in. But it says, how far are we from the level of interoperability that we are describing? And what incentives do manufacturers and technology providers have to apply these concepts? I think you could probably all answer those questions. Doug, you want to go first?
Yeah, let me just take the first cut of that, the readiness question, and then I'll defer to Jonathan for the second part of it. So, I want to say very confidently that the technology is ready, the platform is ready, the ecosystem of tools around the platform is ready. That's really reinforced by the somewhere around 30 Fortune 100 companies at this point in time using the technology, but perhaps more importantly, the number of small and medium businesses that are now successfully embracing the technology. So a couple of years ago, I think it would have been a really, really good challenge to see you guys really ready for prime time. The stuff works. It works well. It continues to evolve very rapidly, as there's more and more learning experiences coming in. But to the question of readiness, the technologies are ready. The ecosystem is definitely behaving differently. So I want to say the ecosystem is adapting. And now what we need to do is accelerate that rate of change of adoption. So, I think technically ready from a business application perspective, I think that wave is beginning to break at this point. Jonathan, I'll defer the second part of the question to you.
Yeah, I also want to answer the first part of the question first, though. So I agree. I think the SMIP and the architecture we've defined is ready. I also agree that in order for technology to succeed, the ecosystem has to mature around it. So we've seen that in the past year, and more of my conversations are with other software developers in this space, trying to understand how they can adopt. I was part of a couple different platform launches in my career, and some of them are around today as successes, and some of them are not around today because they didn't succeed. So this is a really kind of critical juncture where the industry has to decide, is openness important? Is interoperability important? And so the function of the executive council is to say that like loudly and clearly to all of the other players in the space. But it's important for all of the other players in the space to listen and to adapt and to mature their own offerings and capabilities to kind of meet this challenge. I think over the next 10 years or so, we will see folks that haven't met the challenge that are no longer a part of the ecosystem. But hopefully those that have are thriving as part of a healthy ecosystem. So we are at that juncture, and it's a really interesting time. I think the incentives for manufacturers should become clearer as that ecosystem matures, as there are more offerings that work in this fashion, that have interoperability and openness as a goal. The disincentives for staying with a closed platform, in my mind, are readily apparent. Like, it should be obvious at this point that our little industrial IoT has evolved in this caveman-like alternate reality, while the rest of the internet has evolved for openness. And there are definitely some pitfalls there, right? There's some challenges that the open internet is now facing, but those challenges aren't even available to the industrial IoT at this point, because we have 20 years of evolution to catch up on. And I think the kind of explosive growth of opportunity that's evidenced in the general internet is the incentive for doing this right in this industrial internet of things, in this industry 4.0. And like I said, in my mind, that's super plain, but maybe there are those who aren't there yet.
Yeah, I can't help but think when I talk to people about where we are and where we're going, what excites me the most about the technology of the day is that we're really talking about infrastructure, like the technology getting out of our way to solve problems, right? And we're now seeing all sorts of AI tools and things like that will do things for you that you would have had to do manually before, right? And the things that you guys are talking about doing, I think really from a business perspective should encourage people to say, well, I can move faster now because I'm not going to burden my teams with these sins of the past, right? All of the pain that we've been through for decades and build ourselves into silos and boxes and things like that. And by doing so, I'm going to have access to contextualized information, and I'm going to be able to move it throughout my organization and use it in ways that is really, really difficult to do historically. So I agree with where you're going there with that, Jonathan. So with that, we are coming to the end here. So I thought if everybody, each of the guests here could maybe just thinking in terms of the architecture and the workshop and the fact that you have so many people out there that are probably in that same type of situation that Scott had asked about early on. They're bought in. They want to do this, and they're advocating for learning more themselves or engaging with others that can help. Maybe one call to action or takeaway for everybody today. If we could, maybe Doug, you go first, and then Jonathan, and then John will let you have the last word.
Sounds a little bit like a shameless plug. Time to dive in. Embrace the platform. Start using it. Push your suppliers. Start getting more of the tailwinds that we're already feeling at the moment. Time to act.
Excellent. Thank you. Jonathan, how about you?
Yeah, on that theme, the question I want to hear everybody ask their suppliers in 2024 is show me how you're open. Show me your APIs. Show me the API documentation. Show me how you interoperate with other software. And if they can't answer those questions, one, walk away, and two, send them to us so we can show them the light.
And the third leg of that stool, just to chime in quickly, is become part of the sort of crowdsourcing collaboration, and engage and be part of the solution. There's decades of sort of open source engagement in the IT community, and there really isn't anything like that in the OT world. And as we bring these OT IT worlds together, 20 years after we first began talking about OT IT convergence, but as we really do that and facilitate that convergence through the people, the education, the knowledge, the culture, and the technologies that we've been discussing here today, these capabilities, we need a way for the people to engage in ways that are broader than just their individual organizations. And so we represent an opportunity for you to give and to contribute and to be part of kind of solving problems in ways that are much, much more collaborative than we've been able to in the past. And the framework that's here, the protection that's here, that the capabilities that we represent offer that up in a pretty unique way. So join us and be part of the transformation.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to thank all three of you. So John, Jonathan, Doug, not only for your time here today, but the work that you're doing, the leadership that you're providing, the effort that you're putting forward, and the hundreds of people that are actively engaged with the organization that attended the workshop and are digging in, and it's really something to see. So keep doing the hard work. I appreciate that. Also wanted to thank SME again for their support of this this series that we run. And to John's point, I would encourage everybody to check out the CESMII website, look for ways to engage, follow them on LinkedIn. You can also see all of the Smart Manufacturing Mindset sessions recorded on Apple Music or Spotify. And I would invite you to join us again at the end of the month. We typically do these events on the last Tuesday of each month. So I would encourage you to join us again at the end of the month. And until then, I would encourage you that when you think of smart manufacturing, think differently. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody.